Although she wasn't talking about me in terms of not being able to preach on play, it holds true, okay? This has been a tumultuous few weeks in the world around us. Although some unknowns are now known, there remains an ever-expanding list of what is still pending and a continuing incredulity of stories, lies, truths, half-truths, exploding on social media and the various pundits we may follow. The Olympics and balloons are giving a brief reprieve, but I'm aware that in many conversations recently, there's an anxiety around what is happening as we move closer to the fall's election. Sometimes it's expressed as a low-level sigh. More often it's a prolonged fear and escalates as the conversation continues. These discussions center on the recent Supreme Court decisions, health of presidential candidates, gun violence, policies and stances that are based on exclusion versus inclusion, discussion about what is Christian or nationalist or patriotic or loving or. The feelings run the gamut from hopeless, helpless, depressed, and angry to relief, skeptic optimism, but still fear about what may happen. In the Gospel of Mary, most of the disciples show up as anxious, depressed, and scared of what will happen to them. Because if they did not spare him, how will they spare us? This 2,000-year-old comment seems to summarize much of what I'm hearing now. And a classic flight or freeze response to what we are experiencing. I'm sure you've heard of this classic fight, flight, freeze. The disciples don't fight, they're just fleeing or freezing. But this response is something that all animals have as a way to quickly and effectively respond to danger. My guess is we've all experienced it at least once, if not multiple times in the course of our lives. But what is it? And how does it happen? So over time, we have developed, okay, we're getting into a science thing, and I'm now telling you more than I really know. So let me just, okay. So over time, we have developed an area in the brain whose primary function is to constantly scan the environment to keep us safe. Constant. Primarily in the amygdala, its function is to act rapidly, so that in mere milliseconds, danger and safety are evaluated and we react. In less time than it takes to read this sentence, the amygdala receives and processes stimuli, assesses whether there is a match between past experiences and the current situation, and if it senses danger, then activates an autonomic reaction of either fight, flight, or freeze to keep us safe. That happens in less time than it took to read that sentence. This split-second reaction affects our emotions, our breathing, our nerves, muscles, digestion, adrenaline levels, as well as all of our senses and other parts. The neuropathways that exist to the neocortex part of the brain do not even have time to receive the initial information about the current situation until after the amygdala has completed the entire circuit and reacted. That's how quickly there are more things that go down into that autonomic responses than the other way around. Okay? So it's when the amygdala can't find a suitable danger and thus pauses while continuing to scan that the neocortex, or so-called rational brain, can influence and direct actions if needed. To describe this action, Daniel Goleman coined the term amygdala hijack. And that was about 30 years ago in his book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. The amygdala rapid response is designed to protect us And it does, protecting our lives and possibly those of others. And when it works well, we feel gratitude at its effectiveness to do so. We don't need our burning fingers to linger in a fire while we kind of think about it. You know? But, if the amygdala finds a match to a perceived danger that's not really there, or is not a real threat to us now, even if it was, for example, when we were a child, then we can react impulsively, irrationally, and even destructively, potentially causing harm instead. We hopefully realize, but sometimes only much later, that our reaction was inappropriate, over the top. Possibly a reaction to a previous pain or situation, but that's basically, although sometimes they're tangents, connections, but it's basically unrelated to the current event or person, and it's not helpful for us at all. PTSD and other trauma responses are examples of this amygdala hijacking. In this kind of experience, we become deadly serious in our fear and our reactions. Any connection to play or joy or balloons, absent. So, I have two older brothers, both of whom served in the military during the Vietnam era. My second brother spent a year in the infantry in Vietnam, while at the same time, my oldest brother lucked out, spending the bulk of his time stationed to a base in West Germany. Both served in the Army at the same time, but in two very different arenas. Both of them moved back home at about the same time after their time in service, and for a few months shared a room in our family home. During that time, one night, my oldest brother awoke to go to the bathroom. He noticed that the sheet had fallen off of my second brother, who was sleeping, and so he reached over, pulled up the sheet, went about his business, and then went back to bed. The next morning, my second brother pulled him aside and said, "Bill, please do not ever do that again." And my oldest brother was kind of confused and was wondering what he was talking about. And it was like, "What are you talking about?" The chilling response was, "I could have killed you last night." My brother was stunned. "Again, what do you mean? You're talking about pulling up the sheet? You were fast asleep. You didn't move." And my second brother said, "I've been trained to sense movement, but remain perfectly still until I can defend against or kill the enemy that's attacking. Although I was perfectly still and my eyes were closed, I was wide awake the moment you came over. Gratefully, I had a few seconds to realize I was at home and not at Nam, and that was my brother, not the enemy." But please, don't ever do that again. I may not get those few seconds next time. Amygdala hijack. What has happened before, we think is happening now in real time. We become deadly serious in our reactions. So what can we do about it? The newest studies in brain development focus on what's called the adaptive brain, because they're discovering that the brain matter in all creatures, including reptiles and insects and mammals, as well as humans, is wired to be interdependent, adapting and developing based on experiences and needs. Various studies conclude that one aspect of our adaptive brains evolved not just to react, but to simulate and predict potential outcomes. And that's a way to cope with challenge and threat. So the faster and more accurately, so not just faster, but more accurately this can happen, the safer we are. Researchers now propose our minds work in two ways simultaneously. First, and I'm now, again, saying more than I know, but I'm trying to read words. First, as an interoceptive system that crosses over various parts of the brain's cortex, transmitting information through connections in the amygdala, but also the hypothalamus, ventral striatum, and the periaqueductal gray. Yes, you should be impressed. Sending signals to control and activate the spinal cord for the autonomic responses. But at the same time, it sends information to other areas of the brain, including the neocortex, to help determine the prediction error for what is being seen as threatening, which is an interesting development that they're beginning to see. It's helpful because this explains how the brain adapts and becomes organized so to respond to stress both quickly and rationally. Our very survival can depend on our ability to change our current course, to respond accurately in the face of potentially advantageous as well as threatening events. So in one of our sacred text readings for today, the potter and poet, M.C. Richards, discusses the process of centering clay on a potter's wheel, centering down and then reversing and centering up, and then repeating the process again and again. She sees it as a spiritual practice as well, keeping a person continuously engaged with experience, beginning with pain and ending in paradox, not resolution, paradox. As a potter, the process creates flexibility and adaptability in the clay, all while remaining centered on the wheel. Only then can a new pottery piece be formed. So I have a friend who is a potter, Jessa Decker-Smith, and she has made some short videos of her work. With her permission, I'm going to show you one of her videos, or actually Raymond's going to show you one of her videos of the centering and formation process that M.C. Richards describes. So let's watch it. This only sound, she has a fire in the background. So the only sound you'll hear is that kind of crackling of the fire in the background. And let's pay attention to the process as it unfolds. And what is it like to move from a chunk of clay to something that's centered, flexible, and becomes functional? So we're going to watch it. Isn't that wonderful? It's just fascinating because even at that moment, she could have squished it all back down and started over again. M.C. Richards also says that the spiritual experience of centering wrestles with evil and the demonic as it does with angels and repentance. So with that image in mind of the potter and what you're doing, I want to return to Mary Magdalene. It's important to remember that in Luke's gospel, she is described as having been freed from 7 demons. Mary had wrestled with the evil and the demonic, as well as with angels and repentance. And in the passage that Beth read earlier from the Gospel of Mary, Mary's vision and message from Jesus includes a description of the 7 powers of wrath: darkness, desire, ignorance, zeal for death, realm of the flesh, the foolish wisdom of the flesh, and the wisdom of the wrathful person. Those are things that keep our minds and souls bound, that keep us traumatized. In other words, they keep our amygdalas hijacked. And it wasn't just her own demons. Remember, Mary also experienced and witnessed all the pain and trauma that happened to Jesus. His betrayal, his trial, his disgrace, his whipping, his crucifixion, and death. Mary remained visibly present to Jesus, within eyesight as much as possible, and others through it all. She stood and watched. She watched while he was being laid in the tomb, watched while the stone covered the opening, gathered burial spices for his body, and returned to the tomb, preparing herself to deal with her friend's dead body. Although not all of the disciples experienced all of that, they experienced most of it. And Peter carried a personal shame of having denied Jesus 3 times. So when Peter and some of the disciples are fearful, and they say, if they did not spare him, how will they spare us? It is a valid and realistic fear. Their amygdalas have scanned the environment and have fairly accurately sensed real danger. Their reactions are to freeze or flee. They are not necessarily overreacting to the situation. They are seeing the real possibilities of their own deaths if they continue on that path. So why was Mary different? That's what fascinates me. Why was she different? How was she able to experience all of that and yet move through it? Maybe it's because she had experienced 7 demons in her life and yet had also experienced healing from them. Had she spiritually centered down, then back up, then down again, wrestling with those demons and the angels, so that her brain adapted to know that although demons exist, they don't necessarily win. If we follow the discoveries of Dr. Elizabeth Schrader-Pulitzer with the scribal changes of Mary's name that I've talked about before, she presents as one of her conclusions that Mary Magdalene is the sister of Lazarus. This is the same Lazarus that was raised from the dead. So had Mary's brain adapted to the wonder and the joy of his being raised from the dead? I wonder if they had laughed together afterwards. I don't think they had balloons at that point, but did they play somehow and realize death is no longer the enemy to be feared? I wonder how was her mind continuously centering, adapting to the new options, the new opportunities, that allowed her to move beyond her amygdala's freezing fear, as well as Peter's despair and challenges. This summer, we've had the opportunity to see the world differently through the Gospel of Mary, through a feminine perspective. In this maybe ideal world, Mary and later Levi, presumably the tax collector who was called by Jesus, speak up and speak out, preaching against the powers that would dominate and silence. Mary concludes her vision with, "The soul replied, saying, 'What binds me has been slain. What surrounds me has been destroyed. My desire has been brought to an end, and ignorance has died. From this hour on, for the time of the due season of the eon, I will receive rest in silence.'" I'm struck that our minds can help us, but also trick us. And sometimes when we stop our busyness and our minds are still whirring in the silence, those demons arise. We're in danger, even if we aren't, leading us to cut off despair and fear. But Mary reminds us our adaptive mind, like that clay, centers up and down between our souls and hearts and can provide rest and even joy in the silence, not the demons. Yes, the amygdala can hijack. It can protect us, but also it can highlight our anxiety and fear responses. So whether it's problematic politics, social media, personal crises and trauma, family struggles, unknown outcomes, all the situations that activate us as though we've been through this before, can we quiet the amygdala? Can we train it to be curious about what else might be going on? Can we enhance our adaptability and live into the power we do have? As we move through the next few weeks and months, we need to turn our minds to the good. Relax the amygdala. Relax it with laughter and joy and balloons and life and play. To see others through compassion, to center and recenter ourselves so that we experience God's rest and peace in our lives. We need to remember we are called to be faithful, even when we sometimes despair. Ultimately, God's truth and love will come to light, even when dismissed or hidden in jars and buried away in the sand for 2 millennia. May we adapt, be shaped into new vessels of clay, remembering that grace will be with us and will shelter us, preparing us, making us true human beings, even in the face of danger, as Mary is our witness. So now we're going to come to a time of reflection, and I'm going to show you one more video. So this is a sped up video. So it's not as long, and it's from a different perspective. It's from, you're looking down, and Jessa is forming a bowl in this particular video. So I want you to watch it, and again, be mindful for what is coming up for you as you watch it, and then we'll have a couple of questions.
Wow.
She's fabulous, let me just say. So if I will give you links to her website or whatever, but she makes all sorts of wonderful pottery. She lives in Denver. So now, questions. Turn to each other for reflection. What comes up for you as you watch the videos of the potter at work on the wheel? And if you were able to center down, then center up repeatedly in your life, what do you think would shift for you? What would be opened up for new possibilities? We're going to have competing chimes. So now a time of just a moment of silence then. So rest in that silence.
Greetings to you wherever you are watching this. For those of you whom I have yet to meet in person, I'm Reverend Nicola Marsh, pastor here at Community UCC. And we see that people like you are watching our live stream each week. And because of this, we are excited to be embarking upon an experiment. And we need you. If you are engaging with us regularly, finding meaning in what we are about, we would like to extend a special invitation for you to be among the first CUCC digital disciples. For signing up for just $10 a month, you will receive a t-shirt with the new CUCC logo. And we are also exploring the idea of offering other content to those of you who are part of this new and growing area of digital ministry. Sign up to support us in this new way at cuccboulder.org/support by clicking on the yellow donate tab and noting you are a digital disciple in the instructions. Or as always, we welcome an old-fashioned check mailed to us at CUCC, P.O. Box 3646, Boulder, Colorado 80307. Thank you for being and building beloved community with us, and thank you for your gift, whatever it might be.